And we're live. So, welcome to the After Dram. So, welcome to you, the viewer, and to our fantastic panel, as you see on the side. It's the After Dram. That means it's time to unwind. So, put your feet up, grab a cocktail or two, and relax. That's what this is all about, isn't it? A quick recap of our evening. Sheila, Dave, Blair, Davin, and I have all been treated to a tour of Bob's distillery, Yukon Brewing in Whitehorse. We're all now sitting in the lounge. We have nice pictures of the lounge and the outside of the place. So we're going to see them all. Let's do all the pictures all the way down. There we go. Let's do it. There, that's what the outside looks like. And let's go a couple pictures on the inside. Yeah. And we get to choose. We're looking at a bit of the whiskey. And then we're finally going to sit at this one here for a little while. It looks pretty good. Excuse me. That one right there. Let's sit here. So here's our recap. We're all sitting in the lounge enjoying a much anticipated beverage. Distillery tours are hard work. We're going to do another quick round of introductions. You won't have the thing under your names, but please tell people what you have in your glasses. So we're going to start with you again, Davin, and then go Blair and Bob.
Well, I'm drinking straight gin from Yukon Brewers. Thank you very much for that, Dave. And I'm quite enjoying. I'm Davin Kergommeaux and co-author of this book that we've been using to guide us through our distillery tours.
Okay. And?
Yeah, Blair Phillips, co-author of the Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries. And I'm enjoying one of the gin and tonics from Yukon Brewing.
Perfect. Now I'm just going to show a picture of some of them there. Dave did this picture for me. So I want to make sure I got it out there. So that's that.
Oh,
sorry, Bob,
took it down before I got the screen capture. Oh, well.
Oh, sorry. Well, I'll put it back up for you, Davin, in a minute. Bob, you're up.
Well, I obviously didn't get the memo. I'm still drinking my Release 20 and my Release 21 from before. So I'm going to have to keep working on that.
You do all you want. You're the boss.
Oh, sure I am.
Dave, what you got, buddy?
Hey, it's Yukon Dave. And if I could figure this damn thing out, I've got the Haskap lemonade in this hand, and I've got the gin and tonic on this hand.
We're brothers.
Yeah.
Brothers.
I got a whole bunch of other stuff if you're interested.
Well, we shall see that in a bit. Sheila?
I did get the memo. So I, too, have the gin and tonic in one hand and Haskap lemonade in the other hand. Because I'm following Dolph's tradition of double fisting tonight, apparently.
Thank you.
So,
good job.
And I'm just joining on the journey. I'm usually on the side of the chat window, typing away like crazy, but tonight I'm actually coming along for the ride. Because Yukon Brewery is my favorite brewery. So
and she's our link to the outside world tonight as well. So when the questions come up, Sheila's the one that we asked to actually bring it into the panel. So she is our link. She's it. I'm Dolph, president of the Alberta Scotch Society. I'm your host tonight. I am double fisting it because I do love to do that. I'm probably going to pass these on to my wife pretty soon, though. I do have my, what's the ice cubes again? Same as last week. The Space Invaders. That's the only way I can make this any different. So my Space Invaders ice cubes in here. You can't really tell from the side, but this was great, Dave, because I can't mess up a cocktail that comes from a can. So I got to thank you very much. It's much appreciated. Thank you, thank you. So last sip. My wife's appreciating it now. It's all hers, and I'll stick with the gin for a little while. And we are going to start with a question to Bob, if that's okay. And this is the after dram. It gets a little bit less serious here, so take this with a grain of salt. But Bob, I didn't want to call it a Fred and Barney or a Ralph Cramden, Ed Norton type of best friend relationship. But from everything I've heard, you and Alan get along famously. No one's staged a hostile takeover. No one's bought the other person out. If you could go back in time a little bit, can you pinpoint where you were both pretty sure that you would be in business together for a while, and why you think it seems to work for you both?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the number one thing when it comes to that is luck. You see a ton of partnerships that just go sideways for no apparent reason, and we never did go sideways. I remember back in the early days as we were getting into the planning and just getting up and running and so on. Of course, not everything would go smoothly, but we had this thing that we did that we never planned to do. It just turned out that way, that when we disagreed, we would sit down at a table, we close the door, and we get to understand the other person's side of the thing. Because we knew, like, I know Al's a really smart guy. If I'm not seeing what he's seeing, then it's probably me who's not seeing it, not the other way around. And when we shared those ideas, we never got up and left the table without us in agreement. And it wasn't someone giving in. It was just someone understanding, oh, now I see what you're getting at. Now I see where you're coming from. And we just both seem to be that way, and that is not, it's probably rare.
Well, it seems like it. But Davin and Blair, I'm going to come to you. Can you think of a serendipitous meeting of people in their creation of a distillery that has a story that's kind of neat like this, the canoe trip and everything they have, or something that just came down to fate, where people came together, 2, 3, 4, whatever it was, for their own distilleries somewhere else in Canada?
Can you think of any?
I wonder about Newfoundland.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
There we go. But it wasn't really fate. They did a lot of planning. I think that's the thing. A lot of these distilleries have a story that's all based on some pretty heavy planning. But yeah, the 2 guys from Newfoundland Distilleries. One was a British guy. He did a bunch of TV shows with a comedian named Dom Jolly. And his friend was in Ottawa working at as a cordon bleu chef.
Ooh, okay.
And they met up in Clark's Beach, Newfoundland, and he didn't want to do the cooking game anymore in Ottawa. And Peter was looking to hang out in Clark's Beach, and they decided to open a distillery based on that concept of taking a chef's palate, simple flavors, and combining them into spirits. And that's what they came up with. And you try their gins, and it's really simple stuff. They have spirit and just a couple ingredients. Like their cloudberry gin is cloudberry, the berries, some juniper, and some savory from a nearby savory farm. And it's those 3 ingredients, and they really pack a punch within this gin. You would never think that it was so simple and pared down.
Good answer. That's pretty cool. Davin, did you want to add, or are we just going to stick with that one?
Well, we can stick with that, but I think like Jason and Elaine McIsaac at Sheringham Distillery in Souk, British Columbia. Where Jason has a long career as a chef. He cooks in private clubs and things like this. Okay. And they start this distillery together, and it wasn't in Souk, it was way out in Shirley, and they're making some pretty interesting spirits. And then Elaine, his wife, goes off in her own direction to make non-alcoholic beverages there. And I just think it's really kind of cool, where it's kind of the opposite thing. You have a couple who are married, who kind of take the same business with the same equipment and everything, and he's making traditional, pretty innovative distilled spirits, and she starts a new business making, non-alcoholic. So I think that's maybe coming at it from the opposite direction, but yeah, I think that's pretty cool.
Excellent. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I love hearing about the other distilleries. We're not going to see them all because there's so many of them. So trying to get a little snippet of them in I think it's pretty good. Bob, we saw 3 distilleries in BC already. They all worked with the government to either create a political will or the legislation to help them start up or grow, or they took advantage of some program that was created by these other people. You're part of the first camp. You're trailblazers, and you were working with the government. So can you give us an example of a time when things went your way with the government? And you don't hear this a lot. So, and I heard some good stories where it went well. So if you can come up with that one for me, please.
For sure. As you know, we were making beer before we were making spirits, and as we got into through our research on making spirits, and thought, you know what, I think we could do this. We learned that it wasn't permitted in the Liquor Act. The Yukon Liquor Act mentioned wine and it mentioned beer, but it didn't mention spirits or manufacturing. It was very specific, those things. So we went in and met with the government right away, and they said, oh, geez, that's going to take a change to the Liquor Act. And I was through the Engineers Act back many, many years ago when it got revised. It took forever. But they said we could do that pretty quickly, except that you can only introduce act changes in the first week of a sitting, and that's gone by. We're in sitting right now, and that's gone by. But we'll make it the next one. So Al and I thought, well, yeah, sure. Let's carry on. We'll see what happens. We'll get our equipment ordered. We'll keep on figuring things out. Worst that can happen is we'll make ethanol for gasoline or something. I don't know what we'll do, but sure enough, the next sitting, the first act change that was made was a change to the Liquor Act to add distilling to the thing. So it's a story that is not often told about the government, that they said they'd be quick and they were quick. Yeah, a little startling, really.
That's good. Well, no, they worked with you, and you made the gesture. You were trying to work with them as well. I like it when things come together. And that gets me to the other side of the coin. I don't want to talk about your government, but I want to talk about another government where things went terribly right away. If you can think of that, please, sir.
Oh, sounds like we're meant to pick on Alberta here now.
I thought you were talking about America.
No, really. I mean, we had some changes that were made by Alberta Liquor in 2015. That basically said, unless you were based in Alberta, your markups would be the same, whether you're Molson or whether you're Yukon Brewing or anywhere in between. And that was pretty devastating to us. That happened overnight. I still have the email that came at 5 o'clock one day saying effective tomorrow. So very quickly, I printed out our prices just so I could see, could this be real? And the next day I looked and our prices jumped about $3 a six-pack for beer, which was kind of significant.
Yeah, it is.
And fortunately, it's gone now. It lasted, I think, 4 years before they got taken to task for it. They lost a hearing here and there, and the process unfolded, and eventually it got removed. But it shows we've been very nicely treated by. When we started the brewery in the late '90s, there were no small brewer programs. Everybody paid the same markup as Molson. And slowly but surely that has changed, and we've always had lots of good things that happen to us as governments recognize that it's to their benefit to have lots of producers, whether they be breweries or wineries or distilleries in their province. It hasn't really caught up much with distilling yet. There's a little bit of modified tiered programs, and then there's a couple of swings and misses. In our mind, Manitoba has a program right now with reduced markups for distillers, unless you make anything with neutral grain spirits, anything, and then you don't qualify. And we do use, for instance, the gin and tonic you're drinking, or the Haskap lemonade is made with neutral grains, and we treat it as just an ingredient that we then process. They say if you're using it, you're not a small distiller. It doesn't matter if your whiskey's made from scratch. You pay full markup of anybody else. So there's going to be a learning curve. I think that's a swing and a miss by the government, and they'll figure that out in time.
All right. And Davin mentioned this too. So I'm going to go up to Alaska. You were selling in Alaska for a while. And now when I look at your conversation with other people, they're not mentioned in the provinces or places that you're actually selling to anymore. Was there like a one event thing, or it was just not profitable?
There was a one event for Alaska. We were just starting to get our feet there when 9/11 came along, and we noticed a big difference right away with products not made in the States. They're a pretty patriotic, nationalistic country anyway, and they got even more so at that point. And so, so it just goes to show something can happen that takes a swipe out of the side of you, and you spend 2 days whining about it, and then you put on your big boy pants and deal with it and figure out a way to move on. So that's what we did in Alaska. For a while, we were selling beer to a zoo in Hanover, Germany. They had started a display that I can't remember what it's called, the Yukon display or something like that. It was odd because it had polar bears and penguins, which is, but without going there. And that lasted 2 or 3 years until the guy that we had formed our relationship with quit and moved on. And it just shows the value of relationships, especially from a distance. They started to lose interest in us because they never met us, so where we had met the other guy. And again, it's just kind of our personality. If our product doesn't fit what you do, then that's totally cool. We're not going to press you for it. We're not going to try and sell you something that you don't want. We'll just say thanks for what you've done, and we'll move on. We are right now selling beer in Japan. We have one bar who buys beer pellets at a time. It's called the Whistler Bar, and I think it's in Tokyo. And the guy he focuses on Canadian products, and it's big enough that he's been selling lots of our beer, at least up until recent pandemic times. But so, we'll try. We're talking right now to somebody who's looking at selling to Brewers whiskey in the Far East. And we always look at these things as projects, not sales. We're not interested in selling some liquid and getting a check and having it flop. We're interested in creating a project with somebody who will help us build something.
Perfect. No, that makes sense. Talking about building, let's go to Davin and Blair. Let's say, Davin and Blair, you're both starting a distillery. You've been writing about it for so long. Let's just make our own. So everything else is equal. Which province do you think is most encouraging for both of you to start your new distillery in? That's
a tough one. Because
some provinces have some great programs, right? Is there a better one?
Oh man, that's the thing. You can read all about the different regulations and policies and all that kind of stuff in our book, but is there a province, Davin, that you would shift to?
I guess 2 comments. Number one, starting a distillery is starting a business. And if you're going to start a business, you find out what all the rules, regulations, requirements are, and then you do a business plan to say, can I make a good living in this environment? And if you can figure out a way to do that, then you can set up a distillery wherever that might be. I think that for a lot of people who get into distilling, it's romantic, or it's, and I think that some people may rush in without doing a proper business plan, and they may not be able to rush out because they may find themselves trapped in something. It's like retiring to the Okanagan and buying a winery, and then suddenly realizing, hey, I'm a farmer. I've got 16-hour days, but for 51 weeks of the year. But I think that British Columbia is probably the most welcoming that I've seen for new distillers, provided you're prepared to use all feedstock that is grown in British Columbia. You can then, make a decent living on a fairly small volume and keep moving up as you eventually reach the maximum for a craft distiller license, and you get the decision: do I then go to a commercial license, take a smaller cut, but some more product, things like that. I think that British Columbia is probably the most, welcoming business environment right now today for a new distiller. Yeah, I think so.
Good. Sheila, any questions from the side?
I have a couple of questions. One I'm actually pulling over from the previous session, and it relates to the fact that we have these lovely beverages with us. And the experimentation, what brought on the idea to start experimenting with distilling your beverages into cans and distributing them? So going to the gin and tonics and the Hascap lemonades.
That's a very good question. Really, we were so well set up to be able to do that because we have a full canning operation from canning beer. We have a distilling license. But it took us, like that Haskap lemonade that you're drinking right now, that was 2 years in the making, of experimenting with different strengths of berries and sugars. And I mean, so there's some sugar that's added to that, but it's not one sugar. It's a variety of sugars to get the combination of sweetness and mouthfeel without too much sweetness. And so it really, when you're in the Yukon and you've got a population of 40,000 people, which probably some of you can see if you go and look out your condo window right now, we learn fairly quickly that unless we're going to be something to somebody outside the Yukon, and that proved to be remarkably difficult, you're only the home team at home, that it made a lot more sense instead to be something to everybody here. So that's where we got into. We were actually the first craft brewer in North America to can in the year 2000. There's a brewery in Colorado that claims to be first in North America, but they were a year after us. And then we got into tall cans. We got into bombers. We'll try and use that home field advantage for 40,000 people wherever we can, as long as we're having fun making it. And that's why I say we didn't rush the Haskap lemonade out because we wanted the money from it, the revenue from it. We took our time and put it out when we thought it was a product that we would want to bring home and drink.
Dave, let's go to you with this question. How easy is it to sell these guys in the summer right now? Like, is one flying off the shelf more than the other, or is beer still dominant with you, buddy?
Well, beer's dominant, but beer gets me into a lot of places. So there's a trust that liquor stores have with us that, hey, this is pretty good. And I never let the guys just take my word for it. I said, here, try this. They tried and they said, yeah, this is great. We're going to go with it. The Haskap lemonade is just flowing off the shelf.
Okay.
The problem is
I like it a lot.
I can't get any more of it because we can't get any more berries. So
and it took 2 years to make.
Yeah, the first 30 cases came in because we didn't know how much to bring to Alberta. Tyson and we just took a guess. Okay, well, let's take 30 cases. That was gone in like 4 days.
Oh, boy.
Good.
The next 50 cases were gone in a week. And I'm out of stock now. And the gin and tonic, like, I really like this gin and tonic. It's
I do.
We make our own tonic syrup using our own gin. Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, having a brewery be able to can a ready to drink product is
It's good for people like me.
exactly for you. Yeah. After the last 3 weeks of you screwing up all those drinks.
Hey, I tried, and I actually tried. All right? Sometimes I do things on purpose to make myself look bad.
No.
I can't believe you actually believe me when I told you to use maraschino cherries and that drink was so red.
I did. You're horrible. You're just mean. All right. Talk about the tonic, though, that you make, your own tonic, because I don't think I've heard this from you. So from Bob.
Yeah, we bring in cinchona bark, and it was because every tonic syrup that we tried, made by companies that make syrup, it's almost like the maple whiskey. It would have been a lot easier to dump maple syrup in, but we didn't do it that way. Same with this. We found that all the tonic waters tasted kind of the same and all had a certain character to them that we just weren't too keen on. So we thought, well, could we make our own? And that's, again, we took a long time fooling with recipes to make the tonic water, which is why the gin and tonic has got a sort of a ginger ale color rather than clear, is because that's the remnants of the cinchona bark in the drink. And like Dave said, the Haskap lemonade, we juice our own Haskap berries. So again, make a lot more sense from a dollar and cents and availability point of view to have bought some sort of Haskap flavoring. But now we're waiting for the Haskap crop this year to come out probably in August. And then we'll make some more. So when Dave says he can't get any more because we have no more Haskap, it's because we have no more Haskap. They haven't grown yet for the year.
Well, I said, who knew? We just don't know.
Well, you do now. Make more.
Yeah.
And right away. Blair, sorry, I picked on you right as you're drinking. I didn't mean to. Tell me what you think of these, because you're a cocktail guy. You're the expert. You're the guy I'm going to trust with these questions forever. What do you think of these? And
well, I haven't opened the Hacksapp yet.
okay,
but the gin tonic is really refreshing.
Yes.
Davin, have you tried it yet?
I haven't. You know what? I want to open it when I can finish the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's
Because
2 hours
I'm a
later.
big gin and tonic fan, and I really love the gin. So honestly, I'm going to have it on my deck outside tomorrow if it's a nice day.
That's. I think that's what it's made for, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Sheila, back to you. You said you had two.
Well, I have a whole bunch of them actually, because
Okay.
we're gonna go all the way back to a long time ago. You guys made a vodka. And you made a solstice vodka, and it was made with rose hip and the raspberry and the sage infused. And you kind of, from what I was told, infused it differently than how typical vodkas were infused back in the day. So the process they used was different, apparently.
Well, okay, sorry.
I was just wondering if you could explain how that process was different from the typical process, and if you've carried that forward in how you distill your whiskeys and make your whiskey now.
No, it had nothing to do with the whiskey at all. It does with the gin. We basically made that solstice product as an effort to come up with a clear, unaged spirit that would contain Yukon grown ingredients, which is why we added the raspberry, sage, and now I'm blanking out on the other one. But they were all they weren't harvested locally. We had to buy them, but they grow here in the wild. And we made it just like gin, where we basically infused it in a mesh bag in the still and then redistilled to bring the volatiles over. What we found is that we originally just called it a unique northern spirit. We didn't call it a vodka because it really wasn't. Like at that time, flavored vodkas were, birthday cake vodka and that kind of, like, it wasn't. We didn't want it to be that. But we learned very quickly that if we didn't call it something that people could understand, they wouldn't understand it. And so it sold very poorly. I thought it was very tasty, but sold poorly because we continued to get the question, I don't know what to do with this stuff. Like, I don't know how to use it. And to me, that's kind of, well, that's why you buy it, so you can go and have some fun. But I guess not everybody had that same kind of feel I had. So it was, as our launch spirit, I would say it was Flame Out.
But we do have a bottle of it at our house, so.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I was going to ask Dave if he had it. He could actually lift it up for me, because I thought he had just about everything beside him.
No. I do have one in my kitchen. I'd have to run to go get it.
I have an example Sheila gave me.
My husband was up on an air show up in, I guess, in the Yukon years ago, and actually picked it up at the distillery. So that's how we have a bottle.
All right. And Blair, we just saw you drinking the Haskap. What are you thinking, buddy?
I like the tartness. Yeah, it's nice.
He's running to get the bottle. And then my last question was,
Solstice.
Yeah,
Looks
here
good.
it is.
Good looking bottle.
Dave's showing off the bottle.
Empty.
Yeah. So the last question was, so some people over the years have been known to cook things in their stills. Have you ever cooked anything in yours?
Like a lobster or a chicken?
Yes, like
How do you mean
food.
cook things in their stills? I'm not sure what you're getting at.
People have over time been known to cook meals in their stills. Have you ever cooked a meal in your still?
Nope. And I commend you for that.
Experimental meals in your still?
I'm not sure how to add any words to that. Nope.
Nope.
This was part of the after dram last week, or Dave, was it the after dram maybe? And we were talking about a chicken.
Was
And
Blair
then a
lobster?
Yeah, there's a tradition in mezcal where they some people cook a chicken in the still while they make mezcal, and there's the distillery Compass Distilleries in Nova Scotia where they did the same concept with a lobster, and they released this lobster vodka, and it's good, like it's phenomenal, but they do such small batches of it that it's out for a little bit, then it's gone, and then you have to sort of keep an eye out for it.
All right, I would try it.
Oh, you would try it and you would love it.
Would I?
I think so. Yeah.
All right, good. I'll trust you. Yukon Dave, buddy, it's your time to shine. You want to give something away today? Do it.
Well, Dolph and I were talking that we need to step this up a little bit and encourage every distillery to do something a little extra above and beyond. So we're going to give away a bottle of. You okay with this, Bob?
Yeah, as long as I win it.
That's
a bottle of number 21. So what we need is, as hopefully everybody knows, is every bottle is numbered. There's 1,400 bottles. I don't have my glasses on, so 1,400 bottles in this batch. This one has a specific number on it, and so the guesses have to be between 80 and 100. And whoever guesses the number of the bottle right will get the bottle. I don't care where you live in Canada. Claudia, if you're paying attention, in Quebec. So go ahead. I'm watching the
comments on the side.
Yeah.
You've got it.
So I want everybody to at least give one guess. And if you guys blow it, then I'll let you have a second guess.
Oh.
So between 80 and 100.
Win this, Sheila. It's horrible.
Oh,
No, I'm not going to guess.
Idea what the number is.
We've got 98, 81, 86, 85.
It's all the same person.
Yeah, he's only allowed to have one.
I think they're allowed one guess.
So go ahead, Davin. Davin, give me a guess.
I'm going to guess 99.
We have a winner. I'm sorry. Whiskey Ass has got it right with 90 because I said it's between 80 and 100. So 90 is the number on the bottle. I got my glasses on. This is number 90 from 1,400 bottles. So Kent, stop by the house. You can drink all my other booze and then have this to go home with. So
he's a winner, but that was his second guess. I don't know.
Oh no, that was his it was his ninth guess. He started at 81 and just kept going.
So you gotta be quick, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
We'll refine the process in next week.
I'll set rules.
Good job, Dave.
91 and a half from Nick. I mean, Nick, we don't do halves on our bottles. Yay.
Well, maybe we should. All right. Let's go back to Bob. Bob, and you talked about this, the hometown advantage once. So I had this quote, and I just want to put this quote up. And it's a long question for a really small little thing from you, but I'm sorry. Where do you go from here? So again, I'm referring to, there was a podcast called Startup Canada, and you said that expansion is difficult without a hometown advantage. You stated we can't even outspend the little guys who are right down the road, but we can outwork them. I want to know what you meant by outwork them. That's where I'm sticking with it.
Yep, no, that's a fair question. That goes back to mainly to beer, where of course the big guys spend lots of money on advertising, and if there's going to be a rock concert in Tuktoyaktuk, it's going to be Molson who's going to do it, right? If you guys all remember that one. But when you came along to what Dave just did, giving a bottle away for some cause, and I see that I think I read that Kent was going to donate it. He's going to donate it to Festival Place Scotch Tasting. Awesome. That's the kind of thing that we're all about, and we will participate in any of that kind of thing, whether it be Dave or Leanne in Alberta or Leo in BC or us here. If we can participate in something, and I remember when we first launched the brewery, we were about 2 weeks old, and there's a music festival up here in February called Frostbite. And the Frostbite Music Festival said, well, of course, we approached them. They said, oh, yeah, we'd be happy to have your beer there. But at the time, we only had it in kegs. Our bottling equipment wasn't set up yet. And they said, we have nobody to serve.
Okay.
So I said, well, I'll tell you what, if we can come up there with dispensers and serve our beer, we'll provide all the labor to serve the beer. Are you okay with that? And they said, oh, absolutely, 100%. So we spent the weekend at the music festival slinging glasses of our one and only brand that we had out at the time. And that's, I mean, we had feet on the ground and we had time and we had energy. We just didn't have any money.
All right. And you outworked them. You got it? No, that's good.
Yeah, you know what? It's still our philosophy now that if you need something in our community, we don't say no very often. So come see us. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to have brand building implications or whatever, somebody bigger would need. So yeah, we're all in for you.
Good. And you're talking about philosophy, and that was another one of my questions. So we appreciate the philosophy or devotion to the liquid, even at first. Even if you're not sure something has mass appeal, you're still making it. So you're using chocolate malt. You did the sour mash, the maple syrup barrel right now. Fantastic innovation. So the different series. And we didn't talk about the series. So let's get a picture of the 4 different, if we can, right there. So we've got the classic, special finishes, peated, and innovative. So I'm trying to figure this out from you. What does a conversation look like between you and Al when you're trying to decide if it's a special release or an innovation? Because what makes you think, or I don't know. I don't know how the argument goes, because I think in some cases it could be both, right? Who's deciding?
You hit the nail.
It should look like.
For sure, release 20, the maple finish, was a very special finish in what ended up being a maple, at least a barrel that for some of its life held maple syrup. But it was also kind of an innovative way of going about it. So the discussion is pretty straightforward. Well, what is this one? What is it more of? What does it speak to our customers? And we eventually settled on innovative. But the reality is, and it almost goes back to that, closing the door and not getting up till we agree. Probably either one of us would have gone either way if somebody had a strong feeling about it. So, but yeah, from time to time, we're not sure. And the other thing that enters into the fray for us is we went and created a category, that damn innovative category, and it challenges us. How are we going to stay innovative? What kinds of things can we do to stay innovative? So we have that conversation lots.
You need to make more of this, which is my favorite.
Rye.
Oh, it's my favorite of them all.
Oh, is that right?
It is.
Nice.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yep.
Enjoy that.
I tell people if we can't figure it out, we stick it in the innovative category.
I think it's a good idea. Bob, I'm going to come back to the 9.09. You didn't put maple syrup into it. You worked with the barrels themselves. And I'm wondering now, looking back, do you think you would have changed that? Was it too much work? Do you think you got something more out of it?
We for sure got something more out of it because we got a friend who has wood-aged maple syrup that thinks we're stars and drops off bottles now and then. So we definitely got something out of that. And I guess we still haven't learned our lesson because we're still doing it. He was just in a couple of weeks ago filling another barrel with maple syrup. So
nice.
One of these days we're going to tell him, Richard, you're going to have to buy your own barrels. And, but until now we think, or we could just do things the way we're doing it, and we'll have some other, maybe we'll have our release 32 will be maple whiskey version 2. We'll have to see.
A peated maple whiskey. How's that?
It could totally be a peated maple whiskey. Yeah.
Dave, that's fantastic. Sorry, I love that. A peated maple
Something
whiskey.
to cut the sweet.
I have all the ideas and no talent.
Woo, I want it. Sorry, let's go. Davin, I mentioned the 9.09. Can you clarify what that is for people, please?
Well, there's a regulation that says that a Canadian whiskey producer can add 1 part in 11 of mature spirits or wine to their whiskey and still call it whiskey. So you can't add maple syrup and still call it whiskey, but you can add mature spirits or wine. This was brought into place so that high volume Canadian whiskeys could compete with American blended whiskeys in the United States.
Okay.
Because if you use American spirits added to your whiskey, you get a different tax rate in the States, and it's a big break. So, if you're making Black Velvet, it's worth your while to add a little bit of American spirit and pay a lower tax rate. And this is when you're selling your whiskey by the tanker load. Okay? For the connoisseur level whiskeys, it's not used as commonly, although it is. Some blenders are starting to use it to very quickly add new flavors to a whiskey. So it's a little bit like the way that in Scotland they add wine or cognac or something to the whiskey by finishing it in a barrel that's already had it in there. It's already 6 or 7 liters of the wine or the sherry or cognac or whatever soaked into the wood. In Canada, you can just add it directly. It's usually a fairly expensive product, so if you're adding it to a connoisseur whiskey, so it does raise the price a little bit. But really, it was intended for high volume, low value whiskeys so that they could get the price as low as possible and compete with American blended whiskeys.
And I asked Davin this question because when we did our first book club, he described it really well in here, so I knew he knew the answer to it. And but I'm gonna do 2 more questions, one for Davin and one for Blair. So Davin, I want you to think of a distillery that does something really good with the 9.09. And Blair, if you can think of a distillery that does something absolutely horrendous with it. and they would be listed in here, possibly. And Blair, if I'm putting you on the spot, don't. Just think of another one that's good. But I personally want to hear something that just went completely off the books. Just something so awful. I love it. So, Davin, you're up. One that went really well.
I think Black Velvet does a brilliant job.
Okay.
Because what they have done is they blend the whiskey that they send to the States in tankers, and they use the 9.09 so they can get a better price. But they change the ratio of the rye and the corn in that so that they get the very same flavor in the whiskey that they're sending to the States that has the 9.09 added as they get in Canada and the rest of the world where the whiskey is made without using the 9.09. So this is very masterful blending when you can add something that's going to cut your price without losing the flavor just by adjusting the other components. So I think Black Velvet really does a really brilliant job in that.
Davin, I thought you were going to say Dark Horse. I would have actually bet a little bit of money that you would have said Dark Horse.
Well, I love Dark Horse, but I like Whistle Pig and I like all those. Those are nice, but Dark Horse is it was great whiskey. There's no question about that. But I like the art of blending where they can actually decide what it's going to taste like and then blend to that and create it. And with Black Velvet, when they're doing 2 million cases a year, they got to know what they're doing to make them always exactly the same. Dark Horse was small batch, and it's not quite the same kind of precision.
All right, Blair, over to you. Are you going to go with the really, really bad one?
No, well, okay, so you have to realize that
He needs to work.
Well, the thing is that you go to the States and you're trying some bottom shelf whiskey, and they're not going to say, oh, this has whatever, 1/11 of American orange spirit or something like that. So I don't think these lower shelf, like these bottom shelf Canadian whiskeys, should be judged at a certain tier. Like you don't see
Right.
bourbon fans judging straight bourbon against some bottom shelf brand. You're like, there's a bit of a problem with Canadian whiskey is that we tend to lump in the lower brands into the whole entire mix, whereas in Scotland they don't take some like Johnny Red and compare it to everything else. And I think the other thing about the 9.09% rule is that you just have to think of it. It is just a rule. Just as Canadian whiskey, you have to age it for 3 years, has to be aged in large wood. It's just a rule, and we freak out about that. And people seem to focus on it as this negative thing. And if you think about, like, in biblical terms, like, you see that you have the 10 Commandments, and thou shalt not kill. That's a pretty good idea. Thou shalt not steal. That's a pretty good idea. And then there's like, oh, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ox. It's like, when was the last time you had to covet your neighbor's ox? I can only think of like maybe 3 or 4 times this year that I did that, and it's not a big deal.
Well, you don't do that in Toronto. It's all country, you country guys.
Well, I just we tend to focus on this rule quite a bit when there's so much other great positive things that it does. Like it opens up these opportunities, for instance, for the Innovative Series to not necessarily exercise the 9.09% rule, but to inspire different ways of being innovative with whiskey.
Yeah, just because just because we're allowed to do that doesn't mean that we do.
Exactly.
Right.
I think
a lot of great distillers really don't. I know that Vicki Miller, who makes Black Velvet, she actually spat on the ground when I asked her if she used 9.09 in the whiskey she sells in Canada. She said, no, we don't. It's all whiskey. But then for the States, where they're selling tanker loads, I think 8 tanker loads a week or something like that, they use that so they can get a good price.
The tax break is important. It's good.
Yeah, I think it opens the doors for innovation, even though that a lot of the in fact, I don't think, Davin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of one micro distillery that exercises the rule, but they kind of use it as a jumping board for doing really cool, innovative things.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. I know I put you on the spot there a little bit, Blair. Thanks. Sheila, anything from the side?
Not from the side, but I do have one of my own. So I'm just wondering, because we've talked about past batches and how much people have loved them, if there have been any batches that once you've released them, you really wish you had a magic wand and you could just wave it and just keep releasing that batch. And instead of having a small batch, and you could just bring it back over and over and over again.
I keep asking for 14.
Yeah, there's been some. Number 17 there for Dolph.
Thank you.
And Dave is right. Number 14 was highly unique. One of my favorites always. But wave a magic wand and bring it back. I think that we'll probably just enjoy the fact that they're all different. But yeah, for my own personal taste, there's a couple of them that if I could bring them back, I would. And really, I probably shouldn't say this, but I thought release 1 was pretty good. But if I could do it all over again, I'd wait 1 more year.
Oh, that's hard to do. You know what? You get to a point and it's still really good. And
I just find that, time is just a thing. It's one of, like we talk about, the few ingredients that are in whiskey: malted grain, water, yeast. But I also add barrels and time as ingredients because they can be. But 10 years in a fresh dump bourbon or a few years in a virgin oak versus a longer time in a barrel that's been used 4 or 5 times will really have an impact on what that number of age really means. So you got to be a little bit careful with that. But I do find that as we get more, like we now have whiskeys that have been in the barrel for 12 years as an ingredient, and they so far just keep getting better. We do have when we were doing our research early on, we bought one of those little wee barrels from Amazon or something that held about 3 liters or something like that, and we put some new make in it, and then we forgot we did that for about a year, and then we went back and emptied it, and it was almost black, and we tasted it. We went, oh my Lord, let's save this. So that if somebody says it can't be in the barrel too long, make them drink some of this, because it was god awful, just ridiculously bad. So far nothing's got to that point yet, but I do think it's our variety of ingredients that we have available to us is only getting better. So I think we continue to try to raise that bar anyway.
All right. That was perfect. Yes, sir.
Can we go back to whiskeys that didn't really work out?
You can do whatever you want, Davin.
Because I think there's a big misconception about whiskeys that didn't really work out. About the only place where I've really tasted whiskeys that didn't work out very well was with small independent bottlers of Scotch.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that with the large distilleries, there are so many quality checkpoints that a whiskey that's not well made just never makes it through the process. And when we're talking about the 9.09 rule, it's got to be a pretty big operation for 9.09 to be worth their while. And those big operations like that, they're just not going to release a whiskey that isn't right. So when you think of whiskeys that didn't work out, it's people who own a very small amount of whiskey and have to sell it to get their money back. And my experience has been that really, I've only really tasted whiskeys that really shouldn't have been bottled, coming from independent bottlers in Scotland who've bought a few bottles of Scotch and then got stuck with them and just had to get them out there. So when you ask about Canadian whiskey, you can say maybe, well, the new micro distilleries in Canada are smaller. Are they going to do the same? I've only once tasted a whiskey in Canada from a small distiller that really was an abomination. I won't mention the distillery, but they've gone out of business. They don't exist anymore. I don't even believe it was whiskey. I think they added instant whiskey that they bought from Amazon to vodka or something like that, because it was just vulgar.
Great descriptor there. I love it.
I look at the beer industry as the same, because there's a whole bunch of beers that come out. And I think, did anybody try this before they put it in a can and sent it to the market? But they got to get stuff out there. They got to get money coming in.
Money's a big motivator. And Bob and Al, you guys were, I think, kind of lucky. Well, lucky on purpose. You made your luck that you didn't have to put it out until it was 6, 7, 8, until you thought it was ready. So I'm really happy you did. Although I didn't try one yet. I'm still waiting for Dave to crack open his. I have my 2, and that goes to special people when they come over. So it's kind of
perfect. Yeah. Well, you should be able to twist Dave's arm, I'm pretty sure.
Those 2 bottles of one are for my daughters, and I've offered them to sell them, but they said no, they don't want to sell them.
No, I don't want to buy it. I just want to taste one from someone, and I wanted to be there that day, but I wasn't. That's all right. So, Bob, I dug up an old article for 2009 from the Whitehorse Daily Star. It was called "The Whiskies in the Barrels: The Waiting Begins," and she's Stephanie Waddell is her name. So I want to get your opinion on some of the things I saw from 11 years ago, if I can. So one, do you still get most of your barrels from Heaven Hills?
No. As a matter of fact, when we started buying barrels, it was our naivete, I guess, that we didn't really, we'd buy any barrel. If it had bourbon in it before, then and we were dealing with brokers, and they would say, well, we have some Jim Beam, we have some Heaven Hill, we have some this. I go, great. Mix them up, send them up. We don't know. And it probably, again, a bit of serendipity, it probably helped the liquid that came out of a barrel that aged in a Heaven Hill or a new make, the same new make, versus one that aged in a Jim Beam barrel, probably came out with some different flavors. due to different char levels and such in the barrel, which makes they just create different flavor profiles for us to start using as building blocks. We use that spice rack thing, and another example I like to use is Lego. There's 7,000 different kinds of pieces of Lego, but if you want to build a dinosaur, you better have a bunch of them. And you better pick and choose which Lego pieces you want to build your dinosaur.
Yeah.
If they're all the same Lego piece, you're going to have a crappy dinosaur. So, so the reality is having all those different barrels is probably an asset, although it wasn't done by design.
All right. Well, I think it's a bit by design.
Well,
It's serendipity, but there's design. There's still some smart people behind the scenes doing
that was a coincidental decision more than a smart decision, quite honestly.
All right. Okay. 3-day fermentation. Do you still do a 3-day?
It's pretty quick. We'll let them ferment wild. Of course, our beer is a much more controlled fermentation. So 3 days, 4 days is the norm.
It's still there. All right. This is a big one. So the recipe for Yukon's first commercial whiskey comes from two guys. I'm quoting her. Two guys in the distilling field, one in Alberta, one in Ontario, along with Yukon Brewing's own tweaks in the ingredients. Do you know who these two people? Was she correct in saying that? And if she's correct, who were the two guys?
I don't think I would say the recipe came from, but we did spend some time at distillery in Alberta, Highwood. And talked to their distillers quite a bit, and toured around their warehouse, and got a lot of brain picking that was done there. And the other guy in Ontario is Stephen Wright. Some of you may know Stephen. Davin, you may know Stephen.
Yeah, I know Stephen. Yeah.
And he's been up here a few times, and we met him in Kentucky and did some tours down there with him. He had a lot of extremely useful information. None of it was recipes per se, but it was all building blocks to get us to the point where, because we built our still over Easter, we did our first still run the next week. We didn't fool around. We thought only one way to figure out how to use this stuff, and let's start using this stuff.
No, that's a good idea, and it just sounds like research to me more than getting the recipe from someone. But
that is a better way to characterize it. Yeah.
All right. So as of at this point, December 2009, you didn't have a name for your whiskeys. When did you decide that it was going to be called Release 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that you would have all four of the different types?
We got onto that pretty early on. We didn't really want to add any coloring or flavoring. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just not something we wanted to do. And we also knew for the volume that we were producing that we were going to have a real struggle to have the same flavor profile all the time. And we thought, well, we better turn that into an advantage, because it's definitely a disadvantage if we don't. And that's where we came up with the idea of 1, 2, 3 of the 4 different types. And then we thought, well, if we do sequential releases, we have maybe it turned out to be a really smart thing. I don't know. There's lots of people I talk to who have every release. So it generates customers for sure.
I think it's cool. It does well. Thank you very much, Bob. Sheila, this is going to be our last question of the night before we wrap up. So choose.
We've had a lot of people ask about whether or not you'll be selling any casks to clubs, especially at cask strength.
We totally will. We came up with it's. You guys talked a while ago about pre-selling casks. It's something that we decided we would never do, for the reasons Davin talked about. The control of your cask and making sure you knew what you were going to get. And quite frankly, early on, we didn't know what you were going to get. How could we try to sell that to somebody? So we never went there. But now we've actually come up with a process. It took us in our usual way. You asked us how meticulous we are. It took us about 1.5 years to come up with a method where we can make, I think the number, and Dave, you might remember this better than I do, I think a minimum of 150 bottles. It doesn't have to be an entire cask. It can be cask strength if you want it, or not if you want it. It can be a single barrel, or it can be, you can let us build something for you. You can ask for peated or not peated. That's really the only two kind of forks in the road that we can accommodate, and then we'll put something together for you. We've also, because of the way we do those labels, if you're Sheila's Whiskey Club, and you want Sheila's Whiskey Club and logo on the label and the story of Sheila's Whiskey Club, we can put that on the label for you. It doesn't just have to be a sticker.
Cool. Excellent. Thank
So,
you
Bob,
very much.
people can get some of these really old casks from you and bottle it for their club.
We'll talk to anybody.
Oh, boy, I mean, okay.
Let's do it, Davin.
Yeah, you're
Tell
not
us about
kidding.
Keno.
Well, that's a whiskey that we did last year. The town of Keno, which has a population, I think, of 40 up here in the Yukon, was celebrating their 100th birthday. And they came to see us probably 5 years ago about doing a beer for them. And in talking to the guy, I said, you know, you don't turn 100 every day.
Up it. Up it.
What, Bob?
Dave, can you hold that bottle up again?
Sorry, Bob. You're.
Oh,
you're frozen there for a second.
That's great.
So we came up with it was interesting because, and that's where you can see it has the history of Keno Hill Mine on the back, and you know, so it was very catered for them, and yet still had our general brand appearance. And we wanted it to be genuine, so we wanted two things from them. One was to write a description of the whiskey, and it was an awesome description that they wrote. We want it to smell like the wind going through the bush just north of Keno. We want it to taste like the rock that, you know, like it was an awesome description they wrote. And then the other thing we decided is that we better have some genuine Keno ingredient. Our initial idea was to go and move a barrel into a mine shaft because Keno is a silver mine. That's the history of the town. And let's do a year or two in a mine shaft. And that just kind of never happened, and for a couple of reasons. But we ended up settling on harvesting water from a glacier up above Keno early or late in the spring when it was just beginning to run but hadn't turned into silt yet. So we went up and we harvested a bunch of water, and we deproofed the whiskey with water off a glacier just above Keno so that it had an actual genuine ingredient of the town. We sold those and donated $20 a bottle back to the town. To their museum, and we sold them all just out of our store here last June. I think we sold about 300 bottles in June, pretty well just to Yukon residents. So,
Wow.
So yeah, it turned into an awesome project. But yeah, that's a.
Whoops. So there was only.
We want you to work with us on a project.
Well, now that Two Brewers is becoming a cult whiskey, people are going to have to get their hands on that Keno bottling.
That'll be the one.
That'll
Most people don't even know it exists. Dave puts it up there because I actually still have 2 bottles of it to send him because he bought some that
I wasn't
I
sure.
was going to bring down to him in April when I was down there, but of course that trip got canceled. So they're still sitting by my desk here. So talk to Dave. He's got 2 more bottles coming.
Well, he's got
Don't you have?
that he's going to give everything to, so we're not going to try. Blair, buddy. So, any last words? We're going to go to you, and I'm assuming we're going to talk about this. Then we'll do Blair, and then we'll finish off last words with Bob.
Yeah,
Blair and Davin.
Yeah, no, I think we're on a real roll when you think about it with the distilleries we've visited so far. And we've also mentioned a bunch of different names and different distilleries across Canada. So I think it's time that people, maybe you can't get to them right now. If you can, great. If not, a lot of them sell their spirits online. You can order them and have them shipped to your home and enjoy them.
Is that legal?
Yes.
I'm not a cop.
No. Is that legal?
I'm not a lawyer.
So we don't know, Dave. Stop it. Stop it.
No, Dave.
Davin.
Dave, I watched Law and Order a few times, so I can tell you that it is legal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you've already got something from me in the mail, so it must be legal.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's up, Davin?
Oh, okay. Well, we're touring with this book, touring from coast to coast in Canada, the definitive guide to Canadian distilleries. And this is week 4 of, I think, 15 weeks. So I hope you guys will stay with us and follow us right through. Dolph is sending me the links to all of the different things. So eventually we'll get those posted so you can pick which distillery you want to visit and do it online with us, and then get in the car and head out on the road and visit them yourself.
Hey,
Thank you, Davin. Bob, we're going to finish off with you.
Well, I guess I just want to thank you guys for including us. I think Davin mentioned earlier on there's north of 250 distilleries in Canada, and you can't talk to them all, and you allowed us to talk to you tonight. So thanks ever so much for that. And I would just reiterate my idea. If you aren't supporting us, that's fine. But when you make your whiskey buying decision, think about Canadian single malt makers. Go there, don't go there, but at least think about it.
Well, guys, thank you, Bob. Everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure. So a memorable episode for us, one that I and hopefully everyone else here thoroughly enjoyed, because this was a really good 2 hours I spent tonight. So really happy. So we're going to hold up our glasses. Here's the good company. Here's the good whiskey and cocktails. Mine are all gone. I can't put them up. Here's the good books. Here's the good conversation. And here is to seeing you all next week, Saturday, July 11th, for our Whisky Book Club Canadian Whiskey Journey, Eau Claire edition. Have a fantastic night, everybody, and we'll see you all again.